This is a pretty exciting week, I think. Week one of your first year at UCSD. UCSD is an R1 institution, which means it has a very high research activity. And most of you are coming from community colleges where the activity was mostly classroom learning like this. And that's a big part of UCSD as well. But there's an even bigger part that's like above and beyond the classroom, and the goal of this course is to allow you to take advantage of those opportunities. So if you think about community college and you have like classrooms, and then you are going to an R1 institution. What does R1 mean? R1 is part of the Carnegie classification system of universities. It means very high research activity. And I'll talk a little bit about in this lecture what that means. But basically you have class, and if you want to just come to UCSD and just do your coursework, and that's it. That's completely fine. You'll get your undergraduate degree and you'll be good. We can totally provide that function for you. But there is a lot of other stuff going on. So R1 means research. At UCSD, the research budget is about $1.4 billion with a B dollars. That's in the top 10. Some years it's in the top 5. That's more than Harvard, more than Berkeley, more than Stanford. It's a lot. You also have other hands-on opportunities like internships. And while technically internships are at companies, the university's job is to facilitate your entry into internships. You have club teams. You have service orgs. You have study abroad. And you have success resources. And these are things like everything from tutoring to mental health services to diversity organizations. In engineering, we have the Idea Center. Across campus, we have OASIS. We have the Student Success and Retention Center. And what I want to emphasize is this is a building at UCSD. This is a building at UCSD, and it has many floors. And the bottom floor is classrooms. What else is going on in all those other floors? And yeah, it's offices, but it's also research labs. It's research labs, it's computer labs, it's project space. It's all the stuff that an R1 does that makes it unique from other types of institutions of higher education. So what is all of this? Why is all of this important? If you're trying to get a job, you're trying to get into grad school, well, this stuff feeds off of each other, right? So at a university, at an R1 university, at a research university, your professor is not just a teacher. We are also researchers. And there's a feedback between what we do in the lab and what we teach. And so while we might be at the cutting edge of research, we apply for grants from government and private organizations, and we learn what's at the frontiers of research, and then we're able to put that into practice in courses and help you put that into practice. So there's a feedback. And the cool thing about an R1 is that this is all like interconnected. This is all interconnected. You can take what you learn in an internship, and now all of a sudden you have a did everyone get that an hour ago? Yeah, and for some reason it won't disappear from my watch and it's distracting me. Anyway, what you learn at an internship can say, hey, say I'm doing an internship in Washington, D.C. on environmental policy. And then I'm learning about, okay, this is how to get adoption of solar panels or wind farms. And then you go back to your class in political science or in engineering, and now you know why the balance of system cost is important. How much of the dollar amount that you spend on having a solar installation goes toward the labor versus the regulatory aspect versus the technology. Then there are different kinds of technology, right? There's the solar panel itself, but the solar panel makes direct current, but a house runs on alternating current. So then you need all of these electronics in order to convert one to the other. And so being able to put this stuff into context makes it a lot easier to learn, makes it a lot more fun to learn. You develop these semantic associations in your brain that make it easier to take in course material. So the more you know context-wise, the more it's possible to learn in your classes. I remember I read this economist, Tyler Cowen, who I actually interviewed on my podcast a couple years ago, and it was a life-changing moment because he actually gave me the time of day. And he is notoriously, or famously, notoriously, I guess is a bad way of being famous. Anyway, he famously can read a book really fast. Like he'll read an 80,000 word nonfiction book really fast, like in a day. And someone asked him, how long did it take you to read that book? And his answer, he was 56 years old at the time, he's like, 56 years. And the reason is because there's all that knowledge in the background so that when you're looking at a page of facts, you can fairly quickly put stuff into context because you have that knowledge base to begin with. You're also seeing the same types of information in different contexts when you're engaged in more than one activity in at a university. So this is one of the keys to human cognition and memory, is when you see the same fact in one context versus another, but it's kind of dressed up in a different way. And then you can make the connection between one and another. Would you rather have a 4.0 or would you rather be effective in any situation? They used to say dangerous in any situation, but that maybe doesn't have the best connotation. You know, this person goes into a meeting and they know all the background. They know these deep connections. They're like a Jedi or a Sith, or they have these superpowers to be able to synthesize information from any source. And that power is better than having a 4.0. Although you want to learn as much as you can, you want to take your courses for the purposes of learning as opposed to just getting the A on the exam. Okay. Questions so far? Okay, what does it mean to be an R1 institution? I think the reason a lot of you decided to come here is because of all the opportunity that exists here outside of the classroom. And because you may feel like you're starting when some of your classmates have already been here 2 years, it can be a little overwhelming, like you might feel like you're a little behind. But the purpose of this class is to get over some of those barriers that might prevent you from reaching out and tapping into some of this stuff. Because I guarantee the students who started at UCSD as new freshmen 2 years ago, only a small fraction of those students have engaged in the kinds of stuff that I'm going to tell you. So you're really not, you shouldn't feel behind, even though it's impossible kind of not to. So what does an R1 institution mean? 1, R&D expenditures. Expenditures is a weird word. It sounds like it's a made-up word. Well, it's kind of like expenses, but it's expenditures. So expenditures means that this is the amount of money you're spending on research. And I told you it was about $1.4 billion at UCSD. And it's the amount of money you're spending on research. It's not expenses. Like it's not like, oh, our expenses have gone up. It's that we have gotten a lot of money in and we're able to spend it on research. Because you don't generate those expenses unless you have the revenue to spend it. And the reason that the government measures expenditures as opposed to revenues is because expenditures all go through a single hose and it's easy to measure how much comes out of that hose. Whereas it's a lot more difficult to measure all the different inputs. That's why we use expenditures. Horrible word, but it is what it is. An R1 university has to employ a certain number of research staff, and research staff could be faculty who are doing research, it could be graduate student researchers, it could be undergraduate researchers, which will be a part of this course, how to get one of those positions, how to succeed once you're there. Could also be professional researchers, could be transitional researchers like a postdoctoral scholar in art, music, engineering who got their doctorate degree or their PhD degree and then they're transitioning to something else, but they need a time to do some sort of independent study. And then finally, doctoral conferrals, which just means how many PhD degrees did the place give out. So as you can see, there's a big emphasis on research at an R1 institution. And there's a bit of a trade-off too. And I'm probably not allowed to say this as an administrator and faculty member at UCSD, but in many cases, the professors that you've had in community college will be better educators than the professors you're gonna have here. But we are often connected to the cutting edge in the field in a way that a professional educator isn't necessarily. So it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. If you're going to accept the trade-off, then you should take advantage of everything else that's here. So what is the function of a university? Or as the British say, the uni. What's the function of uni? Did I just make that up, or do they really say that? I just made, or did?
I feel like I've heard some
okay.
changed it.
All right. So what's the function of a university? To create knowledge. What does create knowledge mean? Create knowledge means to do research, to create some vein of thought or some discovery that has never been in existence before. It is to spin wheat into gold or turn straw into gold. Wheat is valuable. Straw is, just whatever, feed. And so you're taking something out of nothing. We're creating knowledge. We're creating knowledge which we can then transmit. Transmit knowledge. That's what I hope I'm doing right now. Transmitting knowledge is, i.e., teaching and mentoring. Not just classroom teaching, but mentoring in a research lab. And then finally is the curation of knowledge. So to create, transmit, and curate. What does curate mean? It's not just the function of the library, although that the library is a big part of the curation of knowledge. It's what's in all of our heads. As now part of the university community, we engage with each other intellectually. We learn things, we transmit it to each other, we explain it to society. We go to our Thanksgiving tables and we talk about knowledge, and we bring it to the companies and to the nonprofits and to the policy organizations that we go to after our time here. And that's what curation of knowledge means. Any questions about this? Universities are non-profits, but try telling that to your parents or try telling it to yourselves when you're working a part-time job to pay to be here. So universities are non-profit, but there is a business model. By business, I don't mean capitalism necessarily, but I mean putting the right incentive structures in place so that the thing operates in a way that advances it towards its mission. What is its mission? Creation, transmission, and curation of knowledge. So let me contrast a for-profit and a non-profit. So in a for-profit, we have profit. Profit is the revenues in excess of costs. It's what's left over that's distributed to shareholders. For non-profits, we don't call it profit, even though there's sometimes more money left over. We don't call it profit, though. We call it marginal revenue. Revenue is just the money that comes in. Revenue is just the money that comes in. And a for-profit, this revenue is returned to investors and in a nonprofit, the marginal revenue is reinvested in the mission. What is the mission of a for-profit company? Well, unless it's a double bottom line company that wants to make a profit while also doing a societal good, and to some extent, all corporations should have that in mind, but don't always. The mission is to increase shareholder value. Please don't mistake my statement of what is the case from a statement of what ought to be the case. And in the case of a nonprofit, the mission is education, research. If it's if it's the San Diego Symphony, it's to create music, to curate music. If it's the San Diego Museum of Fine Art, it's to curate art, to raise public awareness of art, and so on. Okay. For-profits, taxed. Nonprofits, less taxed. And then in a for-profit corporation, if you have an investor and you invest in the company and then they do their job and they return some money back to you in the form of dividends or capital gains, then that money is taxed, although probably not taxed enough. And then on the other side, you have nonprofits where the donations, there is a tax implication as well, but donations made to a nonprofit are usually tax deductible. So it reduces your taxable income, and you're also not paying tax on that money, while it also reduces your taxable income and can put you in a lower tax bracket, which is like considered an investment strategy as well. All right. Where does the money come from? Where does the money come from? Most of you have a pretty good idea as to where one pot of the money comes from. That is from all of your tuition. Sorry, costume change. Where does the money come from? If you look at the revenues in a pie chart, this is an R1 public, like UCSD, where you all are now. And you probably know this amount of the pie chart is tuition. I think some people might have come in thinking that it was maybe most of the chart. That's tuition. This is the highest value money because you can do anything with it. You have a lot of cash flow from tuition dollars. The next slice of the pie is the state appropriations. It's what the State House gives a public university. A private university like Stanford or USC doesn't have this chunk. This slice is investment income, where marginal revenues are sometimes invested in as an institutional investor, you could take some of that marginal revenue and put it into like venture capital funds or other equities or bonds, and stock market stuff and get some return from that. Big thing, ugh, that was unpleasant. The big chunk for an R1 is grants. I'm going to get used to that. Some kind of nails on chalkboard feeling right there on that spot. Anyway, so grants. What's a grant? Well, I spend a lot of my time as a research professor writing grants to the National Institutes of Health, to the Department of Energy, to the National Science Foundation, to the Department of Defense, to various donors, companies sometimes, and this money comes in the form of grants and contracts. This is the 1.4 billion for UCSD that I was talking about. The total pie is like 6 billion or something. Then you have auxiliaries. What are auxiliaries? Well, those are sports admission, conference services. So during the summer when all the dorms are empty and we rent them out to conferences, to people who come on campus, and all of the money-making activities that you can do if you have a square mile of land and a ton of property that is unused. So where are you going to put your unused resources? Also, going to the Price Center, when you buy a sub at Subway or a burrito at Rubio's, some of that money goes into the auxiliary slice of the pie. Gifts. So the Jacobs School of Engineering is named Jacobs because Irwin Jacobs, former UCSD professor and founder of Qualcomm, gave a gift to engineering to endow the school, and that's gift. And then the rest is stuff that does not add up individually to more than the gifts pie piece, but takes up a big chunk. Interestingly, this 50% of the pie is the primary revenue. Primary revenue, not Revelle College revenue. What does primary revenue mean? Well, primary means something when you contrast it to leveraged revenue. Leveraged revenue is this stuff. Leveraged revenue. Leveraged revenue is the stuff that you can only do because you're doing these things. Because you're doing education, because you have a bunch of smart people in 1 square mile of buildings, you can do research. You can ask for grants and contracts. You can sell subscriptions to the Canyon View Aquatic Center or to REMAC. You can ask people for gifts because we're doing this great stuff. And because you're doing all of this stuff, and because my salary for 9 months of the year is only to do teaching and for me administration, I'm actually spending a lot of that time doing research too. And that allows me to write grants and contract applications and bring in this other money source. Any questions about this? Yep. Next to state is investment income. So investment income is the capital gains from the endowment funds. So it's the payout. So say that you're getting a 4 to 5% return on an investment. So you have $1 million and you're getting 50K back per year from that. That would be investment income. Yeah, and a lot of that is from endowment, but it could also be from some leftover leftover revenues from tuition and state appropriations. But you don't want to do too much of that, because if it's in the news that you're like hoarding cash, then it looks really bad.
What was the gift level to name the School of Engineering?
Good question. It was to name the building and to name the school. So the School of Engineering. That was $100 million, roughly.
Okay. And why do donors give to universities? Is it to get their kids accepted for tax benefits? What else?
Yeah, so other than it's to the donor class, a lot of them feel, it makes them feel good to give a ton of money to a school. Sometimes they are rich alumni, or they were connected, say as a faculty member. Erwin Jacobs is a good example because he actually taught here for several years and founded his company based on technology that started at UCSD. And so it's kind of like the same, like, it's sort of similar to when, like if I were to give to the ASPCA or to Feeding San Diego or something, I won't put my name on anything, but it makes me, I'm not going to get a shelter named after me or anything, but it makes me feel good to do it. So it's not entirely a cynical, tax deductible.
Is it also a form of self-advertisement?
Yeah, there's a lot of cachet, there's a lot of prestige in having your name on something. Yeah, just like if you wrote an article for your high school newspaper or your college newspaper, that byline gives you a little bit of an endorphin rush, right, when you see that in print. Those are all incentives.
If I were to give $101 million, would they rename the school after me?
They'd probably they'd say, engineering has a name, but the School of Social Sciences doesn't have a name yet. That's a good question. Sometimes you see like endowed chairs for like famous professors who are named after like the Annie Smith and John Smith, like whatever, professor of cool research, and then you find that their endowed name has changed and that one went to somebody else. So like there's almost this like musical chairs thing sort of happening. So yeah, that's totally a thing. And I don't want to discount the prestige thing, because that's what does a university have if it doesn't give back to shareholders like a corporation does? Well, it has a presence in a geographic area. It bestows prestige and cachet on the students and faculty and staff. Just like having Amazon or whatever on your resume, it's like, oh, there's a big prefactor in your ability to get your next job or whatever.
What about unnamed campus units, like the undergraduate colleges at UCSD? Do they have a price tag that no one has met yet?
Interestingly, the college system at UCSD is not allowed to raise its own funds. And I think some of that is an egalitarian thing, because if like Revelle College had like $100 million endowment, then the experience in that college would automatically be better than the other 7, because you get to pay for, you could get a pool, cabana rental, like I don't know, but like it would, so we're not allowed to do that in the colleges. But the schools like engineering, social sciences, math and physics, math, chemistry, physics.
Different level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, good discussion. Who is the university peopled by? Who are the people? You have students, you have academic, and you have staff. Students, you have undergrad, you have MA, MS, etc. You have PhD, other doctorate types of degrees, MDs as well. Then you have something called a postdoc. A postdoc is sort of like an academic resident, like a faculty member, like a doctor has to go through residency before they become an independent doctor. Whereas a lot of professors in a lot of different fields have to do some kind of extended training after they get their PhD before they can become a professor. So like I was in school for 11 years after high school to get my job at UCSD. It was 4 years of undergrad, 5 years of PhD, and 2 years of postdoc. But the postdoc sometimes gets an academic title as well, so we'll draw a line there too. A postdoc can teach a class. So can a senior PhD student, but postdocs get a better title. You have the research faculty. This is like me. So I teach 3 courses a year nominally, but because I'm an associate dean, I only teach 1 course a year, and then I volunteered to teach this course, and then I teach a course over the summer, but I did that for the cash money. Because faculty don't get paid over the summer unless we have research grants or we teach. Then you have teaching faculty. And teaching faculty teach usually 6 times per year, so 2 courses per quarter. And then staff is everybody else. So building and grounds, administrative staff, student affairs staff, financial staff, human relations staff, all of those categories. Any questions about the...
Is there a maximum number of courses a professor can teach?
It's an interesting question. It doesn't have a simple answer. So my appointment level is that I'm supposed to teach 4 courses per year. My department's rule is that you kind of count the PhD mentoring as a course, and the department chair kind of lets it go. So 3 is the norm in, I would say, most departments, but officially it's 4. If I wanted to teach more, I think I could, but they wouldn't just add another 1/6 of my academic year's salary. They would give me the rate that they would pay the absolute cheapest person that could teach that course. In contrast, not that I have experience in negotiating this exact aspect, but if you, as a faculty member, want to buy out of a course, say you got a bunch of research money and you're like, you have some unrestricted money and you want to pay UCSD to I don't want to teach that class, you have to pay a full 1/6 of your salary out of a grant in order to do that. It doesn't really answer your question, but that's a little bit.
So for faculty to teach additional courses, say over the summer, do they do it for the monetary incentive alone?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm only supposed to teach 4 units this year, but I'm actually teaching 10 because I taught over the summer, and then I'm teaching this class, which is 2 units. I actually didn't even ask if they were going to pay me for this, so. See ya. That's good. Okay, so some of you may have seen like how there's like the chancellor and the executive vice chancellor, and you get these emails with all these like academic mid-level management titles, and I told you I'm associate dean and whatever. What does all this stuff mean? Well, if you look at kind of the rankings, the professor is down here, then you have the chair of the department, so Department of Chemistry, Department of Ethnic Studies, Department of Visual Arts. Then you have the dean, and then there are these associate deans like me, and then you have the executive vice chancellor, and then you have the chancellor. And the University of California does things a little bit weird, like you may have heard the word provost, which is the chief academic officer at a university. That's what we call the executive vice chancellor of academic affairs, because we want to be special. The chancellor everywhere else is called the president. The chancellor is not the president because the University of California has 10 campuses and there can only be one president. And that president, Michael Drake, is in Oakland at the University of California Office of the President. Cool. All right, so I just wanted to give you a brief overview. A lot of this stuff I didn't even know about until I was like not only an employee here, but in an administrative leadership role. But I think it's important to like know where your activity, like how your activities fit into the university outside the classroom, and how they can be supported through these various channels, and who are the people involved, what are the units involved. I mean, this is probably way more like detail than you ever need to know. You just want to know how to get a research position and do well in class. You know, that's totally fine. But I think it's helpful to know the context, especially because you worked so hard to get here, and you can just like so many undergraduates don't take advantage of the situation they find themselves in once they're at a premier research institution. And I want you to be able to speak the language so that you can supercharge your time here and get everything that you want to get out of it. Little bit of housekeeping stuff. So some of you have already been to your Monday discussion section, and your discussion leaders, raise your hand, discussion leaders. So we have Ben, Shruti, and Sophia. And your discussion leaders are your points of contact for the discussion topics and questions that you're going to post on Canvas. And so for this class session, you'll do that by midnight on Sunday. And then in discussion section, you'll talk about those. And then we'll have a new topic in lecture at this time next week. Actually, we're going to have a guest speaker for the first half of class next week from Oasis. And then we'll talk for the next 20 minutes about academic success. And so we're kind of in a 2-week cycle. You learn, then you discuss, you learn, then discuss. Any questions about anything I've said? Structure of the course, anything?
So the discussions are mandatory?
Good question. To get credit for the course, you have to submit the question or discussion topic, and you have to attend discussion for that week. I'm not going to take attendance, but they will. And so I'm not going to take attendance, but this course will, or this, my lecture, I'm hoping to make it available on YouTube. If the podcast recording isn't good enough, it might be. I'm going to check it out and see. And the first lecture might not be podcasted, but I'll make it available anyway.
Can you get paid to do undergraduate research?
There are programs on campus that would pay you by the hour for undergraduate research. There's one called LAEP, LEAP, spelled wrong. But there are certain criteria about financial need that you might have to reach to have access. And then your professor could also pay you out of a grant as a research assistant. Typically, that's more common over the summer than it is in the academic year, because the thinking is you can take research as a class. You can take it for, most departments call it 199 credit, and you can do that original research. You're usually paired with a grad student or postdoc, sometimes directly with the professor, and usually the knowledge is flowing into you at the beginning of that relationship, but then over time you're able to request a salary if you're not taking it for credit. So it varies by department and by professor, but there are ways of getting payment for the regular year. The other program is TRELS, TRELS, and that's another way to get a stipend for research. We'll have another whole presentation on the Undergraduate Research Hub and all the funding sources as well. But yeah, most is available over the summer. Academic year generally is taken for credit, but there are exceptions. All right, thank you. 1 down, 9 to go.